Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. A couple weeks ago, I released one of my old Stepping Up to the Plate episodes, a little trip down memory lane. This episode is going to be the same, releasing two interviews that I did with a dear friend of mine, probably close to 10 years ago. But my friend Russ Herbein just passed away last week after losing a battle with cancer, and as a tribute to him and his memory, I wanted to release these two episodes that we did many years ago, selfishly for me to hear his voice again, but also to just honor his legacy. He was a very good friend. He was my boss for a while. Russ was the type of person who could see potential in people that they didn't necessarily see in themselves. He's the first person who really encouraged me to get up in front of a room of people and speak publicly, something that I'm eternally grateful for today. He pushed me to do that. He was an integral part in the start of an organization that I ran for 30 years. Unknown to me what that might lead to. I think he, deep down, probably knew it would be much bigger than what I ever thought it would be. He helped start the Spring-Lawn Optimist Baseball League, which obviously led to Berkshire Baseball, which morphed into the Big Vision Foundation, which I'd spent 30 years of my life dedicating to improving the lives of kids through sports. So without Russ, that organization never would have been what it turned into. And again, when I first started it as a young man, 19 years old, 20 years old, I never envisioned it to be what it turned into. But I actually do think that Russ knew that it would be bigger than what I thought it would be. I don't know if he realized it would become as big of an impact that it did, but I think he definitely knew it would be a larger impact than what I initially thought it was. So I'm going to roll these two interviews back to back. Actually, the interviews were conducted by my old producer, Toni Reece. She interviewed Russ and I to kind of talk about the history of the organization. So another trip down memory lane to have Toni, who has been on this podcast for real. She was the guest of my 100th episode of the Journey My Mother's Son, so it'll be good to kind of tie this all back together. And for those of you who did know Russ that are listeners, I hope you'll appreciate being able to hear his voice again. And for those who didn't personally know him, I hope you'll be able to pick up a little bit of his personality. He was always fun, always looking at the lighter side of things and keeping the situation light. And I think you'll see that throughout these two interviews. So enjoy, and here's to you, Russ. Hello, everyone. This is Dan Clouser, president of the Berkshire Baseball Club. I'm here with Russ Herbein, who is the co-founder of the Spring-Lawn Optimist Baseball League, and actually Toni Reece, our producer, who's actually going to fill in a little bit as our host these next couple podcasts that we have. And today's podcast is going to talk a little bit about the history of how Berkshire Baseball got started, which was actually a kind of morphed from another organization that started, which Russ was instrumental to. So at this point, Toni, I'll kind of turn it over to you, and you can talk to the two of us about how this whole thing started back with the Spring-Lawn Optimist Club and the Spring-Lawn Optimist Baseball League.
Okay, well, thanks for having me here today, and I welcome Russ to the podcast series. So I guess we're in for a little bit of a history lesson here. And Russ, if you could help the audience and myself understand how far back do we go with this organization?
25 years ago.
Wow.
25 years.
I met Dan working at the bank. We worked together, and we had kind of a unique situation where we actually worked in the basement of a building. And
That's the only place they would keep us.
and,
They actually had us locked up.
Did
for
they?
A little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, we were
locked-
actually in a
locked
vault.
in a vault.
and
Purposefully?
Yeah, there was a lot of trust records and stuff in there. It wasn't because of any value to he or I. But
yeah, so the work that we did left a lot of time to discuss things on the side. And when I first met Dan, I found out that he was a baseball fan, huge baseball fan, which is kind of what brought us together, because I was a Phillies fan, which didn't make him too happy, but
it's not true. I mean,
the baseball brought us together. Well, yeah, over the years you do, but back then you...
Nah, I like it.
Okay, so far what I'm gleaning from the history lesson is that the two of you were locked in a vault, that Dan doesn't care for the Phillies, and that you had baseball in common. So take me from there.
Okay, well, Dan kept talking about his love of the game and how there's no place to play baseball once you're out of high school. You can play softball, but you can't play baseball.
Right. I actually played a season on we'd worked at Meridian Bank, which obviously is no longer in existence, or technically Meridian Asset Management. We were in the trust division.
They didn't go out of business because of us.
No.
But they did lock you in the vault.
They did lock us in the vault. But I played a season on the Meridian slow pitch softball team, and could have been one of the more miserable summers
it drove
of my
me nuts.
life. Right. I mean, nothing against slow pitch softball, but when you're used to playing baseball, there's a distinct difference between slow pitch softball and baseball. And so Russ and I would talk just about, at that point there was another league, and another amateur adult league at the time, the Lebanon Valley League, which was in existence, but it only played on weekends. There was nothing, no type of weeknight, or what they like to call twilight baseball leagues, in Berks County at that point. So the conversation just kind of grew from there, and I don't even know for sure how it came to let's start a league.
Just about every day after that softball episode, Dan would come into work and tell me how he wished there was some place to play baseball. So one day, just in conversation, I said to him, well, why don't you start a baseball league? Well, I guess he brought up it would be nice if we could start a baseball league, but I don't know how to go about it. I said, well, I have some connections. Let me make some telephone calls. And I called down. My first call was down to the managing editor, was he? Yep. Something like that.
Yep.
Of the Reading Eagle, who Al Narino was his name, and said to Al what I had in mind, and he said, when can you come? I said, well, we go to lunch at 12 o'clock. He said, well, can you be here at 1 o'clock? Made a lot of sense. We're going to lunch at 12 o'clock, be there at 1 o'clock. But I said, okay. So we
were only a couple blocks away.
So we walked the 2-3 blocks down to the Reading Eagle and met Al. And he took us over to the sports department, introduced us to a couple people. Then we went into a conference room, and for like the next hour and a quarter,
I was just
baseball.
happy at that point that I was with my boss during this extended lunch period, because I think it was actually more than an hour and a half. So,
well, yeah, I think we left at 12 o'clock. We didn't go to the meeting until 1 o'clock.
Yeah. You had to get the lunch hour in. I mean, really.
So it was kind of funny just the way that conversation, transpired. As soon as we started the conversation with Al Narino, and like I said, he and Russ knew each other. This is the first time I had ever met the man. And, when you started talking about baseball, the conversation just took off. And I remember
everything
Al
all just came together.
Talking about, leagues up in Allentown and stuff like that. And he called Mike Zielinski, who was a sports editor at the time, and, told him to, meet us in the conference room. And then we got Dave Kutch involved, who actually ended up writing the original article in the newspaper about it. And, we were the league in and of itself at that point was called the Spring-Lawn Optimist Baseball League, which was a project of the Spring-Lawn Optimist Club, which Russ had roped me in to join in that.
so
at
we
a
could
young
form a
age as
baseball
well.
league.
Russ came up with the idea of if we do it as a project of the club, we could use their insurance, use the Optimist Club's insurance, and just kind of build off of it from there. And again, we started out as an adult baseball organization, and that's what this was really about, was for myself and some of my friends from high school to give us an outlet to play baseball. There was no other, vision beyond that. It was just to play baseball. And one of my other friends from high school happened to work with us as well, and was, was one of Russ's employees also. And, so he was involved in the very early stages. So, there was a small group of us that kind of, got the ball rolling, so to speak. And we ended up scheduling our first meeting, just an open meeting, a couple days after the article ran in the paper. The article ran on October 15th of 89, and we had the meeting scheduled for October 17th of 89, which, ironically, Russ, I don't remember this because you're a lot older than I am, and I know your memory's starting to go a little bit, but
Thanks.
If you remember, that night was also the night of the earthquake during the World Series, which Brad and I had talked a little bit about on our podcast. So right off the bat, we said that this was something that was kind of earth-shaking, and we kind of, went off of that. And as you evolve here, and you kind of see a lot of the different little pieces of this web and how they fit together, it's kind of funny again when you bring Jackie Hoffman into the equation. Our biggest publicity early on in our organization, something that gave us a shot in the arm, was David Stein, who was the morning show host at that time, ended up playing in our league. And we were Mike and Dave called us at the bank one morning, and we were on the air with the bank, and that's when Dave decided he was going to start playing. And he was a left-handed pitcher, and he was, at that point probably in his early 30s. But that really kind of, again, gave us a shot in the arm because, this was something that David Stein talked about quite a bit on the air, was how he was going to be coming out of retirement and playing again. And he was actually a really good pitcher and a nice guy. And, I tried to rope him into actually being on the Berkshire Red Sox at the time, but we, we had to kind of handle that delicately, and he ended up playing on another team in the league. But it was a huge help that he was involved.
Well, I want to fill in some gaps, though, before you go any further. What was the article? You went to a meeting, and next there was an article. So what was the article about?
Well, the article was just about the fact that that there was no adult baseball in Berks County, and we were going to form a league. Anybody who's interested, come out to the Sinking Spring Fire Company on Thursday night. And
Tuesday night,
and we'll sit at ladder T's right. And we would sit down and discuss it. So, of course, at that time, there was no Berkshire Red Sox because there was no league, so there was no team.
Right. We hadn't existed at that point
either. And on Wednesday morning, when we got into the bank to work, we sat there that morning probably until lunchtime talking about what happened the night before.
We got a lot done. That good thing Meridian Bank doesn't exist anymore.
Really?
So,
and it wasn't because of us; it was other reasons.
Right. I keep hearing that.
But he said, "Well, it looks as though this is going to go. Now I have to get a team together." Well, I think your original idea was to get a bunch of fellows who you played in high school with, which is basically what happened. Then he said, "Now we have to come up with a name." Well, I can be honest and say that when we sat talking about a name was when I started to get the idea that Dan had a little bit more in mind than a adult baseball team in a league. Because one of the things he said was, well, of course, being a huge Boston Red Sox fan, he has to use the B.
World champion Boston Red Sox. 2013 world champion Boston Red Sox. Right. Just so we don't forget that.
Right.
Well, that's all right. The Phillies were playing golf before they were. Down in Florida, so there. Yeah. So,
I'm trying, folks. I'm really trying.
He went out. And he said, I need something to start with a B because I can use the Boston hat if I do. I don't have to come up with a logo. I already have a logo. We need something to B. So we're sitting there looking through telephone books and talking about things and all. And, of course, when you in Berks County, you go into the B's and the Yellow Pages, and there's a lot of Berkshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, Dan comes up with the idea. He said, gee, if we name it the Berkshire Red Sox, that not only gives me a B, but instead of having a sponsor, look at all these people that can sponsor the team.
Yep, there are a lot of Berkshires.
So,
So based on the phone book, based on
Phone book,
Boston Red Sox,
Boston Red
with a
Sox
B.
And there's also some history. I mean, I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I find more and more I'm becoming more of a history buff. But, also knowing that the roots of Berks County came from, Berkshire, England, or I guess technically Berkshire. England,
but you're Berks County,
played a big part, right? Played a big part as well, and it also didn't tie us to one area.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, a lot of the guys in that first team, we graduated from Schuylkill Valley High School, so we didn't want to be the Schuylkill Valley this or the Leesport, anything like that, or why I'm missing, because it just kind of really tied us to one location,
Mm-hmm.
and the Berks County Red Sox didn't really flow off the tongue as much as the Berkshire Red Sox at that point. So that's really how we ended up getting started with Berkshire baseball at that point. Again, it was called the Berkshire Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to bring Russ in because obviously this being our 25th year, and we've actually got another, big change coming up here that, is on the horizon, so to speak, as we have our rebrand coming up. And I just wanted to give people a little bit of a history as to, where we came from and where we're headed, and, Russ's perspective there. So I know we're kind of just about out of time here, so, maybe we can get Russ back in another day here and, before our rebranding that kicks off Friday the 24th, and just talk a little bit more about some of that history. If, Toni, if you'd be,
Mm-hmm.
able
Absolutely.
to host as well again there, and Russ,
There
if
is
you can
no
make
hosting.
it back. Yeah, it's more of a impromptu conversation more than an actual hosting, but
But we'll give it our best the next time.
yep. So tune in next time, and make sure you mark this Friday on your calendar for our big event, big rebranding event out at the Abe Lincoln. Starts at 6:30. Show actually starts, and unveiling starts at 7:30, and then we have Caroline Reece and Seeking Home will be playing a concert at the Abe Lincoln afterwards, and we hope to see everybody out there. So until next time, thank you very much.
Hi there, this is Toni Reece, and I am guest hosting the Berkshire Baseball Stepping Up to the Plate podcast series. And this is part 2 of a history lesson. And the history lesson is with Dan Clouser and Russ Herbein. And if you listen to part 1, you can hear, number 1, the camaraderie between these two gentlemen, the rivalry between their two teams, I'm imagining that they're fans of, and also how this wonderful organization was created. So if we could just do a recap, guys, for our audience, okay? You guys were locked in a vault, you worked for Meridian Bank at the time. You needed to find a baseball. You wanted to start a baseball league, Dan.
Correct.
Russ, you were kind enough to let him bend your ear on this for a while, right?
Right.
And then you used your contacts at the paper, went in for a meeting. They were impressed and realized there was a need that needed to be fulfilled, correct?
Yep.
Right.
And they wrote a story about that need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that need was originally filled by what league?
The Spring-Lawn Optimist League, which was sponsored by the Spring-Lawn Optimist Club.
Okay.
Which both of us were members of. Russ, obviously, a member longer than I, and when we'd worked together, he had gotten myself and some other friends involved in the Optimist Club, and then he saw this as a venue to use it as a club project, really.
Yeah, well, it lended itself so great to it because to start a league, you need things like insurance, you need publicity. It makes it a whole lot easier to get it through an organization that's already there.
Yeah, technically the league itself is still in existence as an adult baseball league. And it's now called the Quad County Optimist League, still keeping its ties to the Optimist roots. So Berkshire Baseball basically evolved from Berkshire Baseball could not exist if we didn't have a league to play in at that point. So, on October 17th when we had that meeting, we were already in contact, we being a group of friends from Schuylkill Valley High School, that, if the meeting went well, we knew we were going to have a team. So when we went into that meeting for the league, we knew we had one team, and that was us. That was the Berkshire Red Sox. So without the league, our organization would not have been able to exist.
Yeah, and by holding this meeting, we brought together other adults interested in the fact that there was no adult baseball in Berks County. And I can still remember the night of the meeting. There were quite a few people there.
Yeah.
It was impressive. And the interest was there from day one.
Yeah.
That, yes, we need a league.
And I think it was probably more impressive for Russ than it was for me, because I was young. I was 19 years old. So I didn't know what to expect. So, whether there would have been 20 people there, or I think we were somewhere around 70 or 80 people at that meeting.
Yes, I think so.
It really, for me, I was just taking it in stride. And I think
you were in heaven.
Yeah. He probably put it into perspective the next morning when we got to work, that Wednesday morning, when, we're sitting there and we're doing, our jobs, which a lot of that was, microfilming and stuff like that, which, you can actually work and talk and still be productive, which is a lot of what we did. And I remember him saying to me at one point, shortly after we started our day, about, do you realize what we did here? And I was just like, we started a baseball league. And he said, well, you're going to change the history of Berks County. And again, I was 19 years old, so I was just like, oh.
Really?
Cool, But that kind of put it into perspective how big of an idea it was even then, 25 years ago. But I still don't think I really, really grasped it. I think him, with being a little bit more experienced in life, probably had a little bit better of an idea as to even then how big it was. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Russ, what did you see? What did you see as what was happening here?
Well, it was bringing all these people together that were looking for some place to play baseball. I never imagined that there were that many people, adults in Berks County, who wanted to play baseball. I always thought they were, they play baseball in high school. When they get out of high school, they play softball. That's what they do. And they wanted to do that, but it turns out that's not what these guys wanted.
What was the next turning point?
We needed umpires.
Umpires.
I remember that. So we had a meeting, and I remember distinctly that the umpire who we had the meeting with basically told us that this league would never get off the ground, that he's had many of conversations with people like this, and they have great ideas, but it never comes to fruition.
And that's all he had to say to Dan. And it was over.
So, Dan, you said.
I guess I was too young and naive to take no for an answer, for somebody to tell me that it couldn't be done. Because I guess my question was, why couldn't it be done? Why couldn't we do this? Whether I was 19 or, whether you're 49 at that point. What?
So how
I
did
couldn't
you
get
overcome
the
that?
difference.
I think just in our
didn't faze me.
conversation, I think just
Okay.
in our conversations after that meeting was just that we sat there and said, well, who's this guy to tell us that this can't fly? We have teams. We had at that point 4 teams, I think, when we started.
4 teams.
We have 4 teams.
And that's
full
really
teams.
that was kind of our goals, that we knew if we had 4 teams, we had a league.
I think one of the reasons that it worked also was we didn't go in there and tell everybody what was going to happen. We held this organizational meeting and took ideas from everybody.
Yeah, we did.
When we actually formed the league, it's kind of a formal get-together, we created a board which had representatives on from every team. So everybody had some input into the league, and I think that's one of the reasons that it worked. Nobody was being told this is the way it's going to be. It was, how should we do this?
Right.
So there was a great spirit of collaboration that was really at present at that moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so even though you had the spirit about you and it may have been naivety at the time, who knows, but if a challenge was presented to you, you were like, well, why can't we get around it? How can we get around it? Okay, so now you had your league. You were overcoming these challenges. You created a board. Who was mentoring you at this time?
It was really probably Russ as much as anybody. I mean, as much as he was my boss, he was also another father figure for me, to be honest with you. And it was really, just kind of because even though he said that there was a lot of collaboration, his technical role in the league was commissioner of the league, and I was named president of the league, and then I was also president of our, Berkshire Baseball. And again, at that time, we were the Berkshire Red Sox. But, there was a lot of collaboration, but he was also a good enough leader that when he had to actually say, the democracy part's over and this is the way we're going, he didn't have a problem doing that.
Russ, you're sitting here looking a little like, really? Did I really do that? But isn't that amazing? That's such a gentle leadership, though, which I'm saying that purposefully because I believe that may be what's happening presently.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from that method, where you can sit back and, guide softly, but then when it comes time that you're dead set on a decision, to make a decision. So, yeah, I guess...
Yeah, and Dan says to me, we need a commissioner. That's going to be you. And I said, why? And what must a commissioner do? He said, you do what you're doing now. So, okay, well, I'm not really doing anything. So this sounds like a good job. And then we hold our first meeting after we actually formed the league, and I'm sitting there, and all these guys are saying, not fighting, but forcefully stating their opposite views on a few things. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, no, this isn't the way it's going to go. I thought this is the way it's going to go, and they're saying, no, we want it this way, and we're saying, no, this way, and I'm looking at Dan, and Dan's shaking his head, and I'm thinking, oh, God, now what am I going to do? So I just decided, okay, we're going to back up here, and this is the way we're going to do it. And I think by doing it that way, everybody thought their ideas were all part of it.
Yeah.
Well, everything was thrown on the table is what it sounds like,
Right.
and you took the best of the best and threw out the rest.
Yeah.
Which was what we started with anyway, but they don't have to know that.
Okay, I hope they're not listening. Okay, let's
Take that out.
I want to bring us to the present, Russ. When you think about that conversation that you had with Dan in the very beginning, to all the different circumstances and the ideas and the vision and things that have been brought to life, and where Berkshire Baseball now is, did you ever doubt that it would get here? And did you ever see that?
I never saw it coming.
Okay.
I didn't. I never saw it. It just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And there's one thing, when Dan puts his mind down to something, that's going to happen. He'll keep going, and especially if you challenge him. If you say, no, you're going to have trouble with this, or this isn't going to be quite right, then it's going to work.
What do you think the greatest gift is that Berkshire Baseball has given to the young men who have played and been part of this organization? What do you think the gift is that it's given to the players and to the community?
I guess you could say, honor of being able to play. I mean, Dan runs a first-class organization, and these kids know it, and they appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything, the organization, for what I can see, goes out of their way to make everything just right. It's a first-class setup. There's nothing you can say about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is on purpose. Just like when we had Becky in here, and we did our John Paul II Day, there was no chance that we weren't going to give those kids a big league experience. And that is definitely one thing that is on purpose. And I mean, just like Russ said, I mean, I honestly couldn't have told you 25 years ago that we would be where we are today. It's, as we've grown through this, it's become more focused than what it was. And obviously, as we've gone through this strategic planning and our upcoming rebranding, it's much more focused than what it ever was. So I guess part of what we're going through is when we see where we came from and what we've accomplished in 25 years without really having a plan. We were very reactive as opposed to being proactive. And now with what we've gone through, with your help, with Al Weber's help, is to kind of really refine it and say, you've done a lot, but there's now a lot more that you can do if you focus on it and have a long-range plan. And I think that's where it's come, for us, is that now we do have a vision. I can tell you what I anticipate on seeing in another 25 years. So I think that's the difference now, and whether that's just because we've grown up, or whatever it is, and that I think is going to be very, very special.
One final question. When you look at the distance traveled from 25 years ago to today, what is the constant theme of that journey?
I think the constant theme is, it is baseball, but again, it's more than baseball, because it was using baseball as a tool to really help other people in whatever way we could, whether it was through Cups Compassion or through the John Paul II kids, or Wounded Warriors or Breast Cancer Support Services. I mean, all that sort of stuff. We kind of used baseball as, go back to Brad Wiseman and saying, as the peas, or I'm sorry, the potatoes, and all the other stuff were the peas. And, so there was definitely a constant theme of baseball, but it was also, realizing what we could use, baseball for, to expand on that, so that, again, you've said many times you're not a baseball fan, but I think you're a Berkshire baseball fan.
A huge Berkshire baseball fan.
And I think that has kind of been, the big picture, so to speak, is to be able to use that thread to then bring people in and see all the other stuff that we are able to do. And that's part of why we're going to go through this rebranding, is that it's, really redefining who we are. And we're never going to lose baseball.
Well, baseball is what brings everybody together.
Absolutely.
Right. And maintaining the integrity of the journey.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty cool. Russ, it's been a pleasure to meet you.
And same here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. I'd love to hear more stories from you as far as this history.
Give them to you.
I'm sure you could. I can't wait.
Friday night at the Abe
boy.
Lincoln. You can hear all the stories from Russ Herbein that you want about how this thing has come together.
Thank you so much. Dan, any final words before we wrap this episode up?
Again, just come out to our rebranding Friday night, the 24th. Everybody's going to get a free T-shirt. They're going to get a copy of a signed book. Going to see some great entertainment, and most of all, you're just going to be with friends.
And what's going to be in the T-shirt?
You will have to come Friday to find that out.
I can't wait. All right, gentlemen, till next time.
So those were the two stepping up to the plate interviews I did with my friend Russ Herbein. I hope, again, those who knew him enjoyed being able to hear his voice again. And for those who didn't, I hope you got an insight to what a wonderful human he was. Where, there's some solace in knowing that he's no longer in pain and that he's at peace. But obviously we all who knew him miss him dearly. As he was just such a great friend to everyone. He's always smiling, always laughing. Always, again, looking at the lighter side of things, and he just, as I mentioned in my intro, I just had an incredible knack of, seeing potential in people that they didn't see in themselves. And that just doesn't go for me, but so many other people that he interacted with. I think he was able to see and appreciate more about those people than what they could about themselves. So often, we were able to see Russ back in October when we were back in Pennsylvania for a little bit. We had a great visit with him. We were able to keep in touch with him via text and phone calls throughout his battle at the end, and I know it meant a lot to him, but I don't know that he knew how much it meant to us to be able to keep that connection as well. Remember talking to him one time as we were driving through Colorado, and Sandy mentioned that we had seen a rainbow in the horizon. He asked if he could, if she'd take a picture of it and send it to him, which she did. And then every time we saw a rainbow after that, she would take a picture of it and send it to him. And his response was always grateful that he got to travel along with us a little bit virtually. So again, Russ, we love you. We miss you. We'll see you on the other side, and keep looking for the rainbows, my friend.